lot of things to say and it is already 3:30. So I'm gonna just go and people can come in and late and that's fine. And they can leave early. If you need to leave early, that's fine. I'm gonna start, so occasionally I'm not gonna be looking at you all because the camera is where my New Zealand people are and a few other folks are joining from around sort of the world. So forgive me, and forgive me to my Aotearoa whānau, I do not have this memorized, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Tēnā koutou e nā matua, e nā whaia, e rangatiri taia mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. For those of you who don't speak te reo, basically I just greeted the elders of the church. And so online, I don't think you can see them, but I know of a few of my hosts that are online. So my primary host I know is on, who is Jacinthia, and another one of my hosts is on, who is Māori, and a bunch of people have clicked in, and without Derek, I don't know who they are. So, because it's not on my screen anymore because of the PowerPoint. I'm going to butcher this next part a little bit because I'm sure the university has a statement I'm supposed to read, and I don't know what it is. But because I am giving a presentation to another group of Indigenous people, I would like to give a very abbreviated land acknowledgement, which is to just acknowledge that the University of South is situated on land that was stolen from the Native Americans in this area and was created largely by the labor of enslaved persons. And we honor them today and thank them and apologize for the sacrifices that they've had to endure as we move forward. So I am going to begin. So welcome to everyone, and welcome to all those of you who are joining me from across the country and around the world. It is wonderful to have you all here. As many of you are aware, and if you're not, then I'm not sure why you're here. I did a cross-cultural immersion this past summer for 3 months in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it is a very long time to be away and to be quite that far. The kind of joke I like to make to folks is that come summer of 24, for us, they are in summer now, it will have been 2 years since I had summer. So that's kind of a bizarre concept. The presentation, I named it Them, Me, and Us, and I want to just manage expectations. So if you were hoping to come here today to see a lovely slideshow about the beautiful scenery that there is in Aotearoa, I will tell you all of the pictures are pictures I have taken. However, that's not what this is. There are times in this presentation when I'm going to talk about things that I've learned that was taught to me by the many hosts that I had during my time there. And there are times where I'm going to be sharing from my journal. And in case you're wondering, like, why do we really care what Kris Paul was thinking while she was there? It serves a couple of purposes. Number one, it serves the purpose of, for those of you who are not yet seniors, or even if you are, who might ever consider doing some form of a cross-cultural immersion, I think it would be wise for you to know a little bit about what that experience is like. It's not sightseeing. I will tell you completely unashamedly, I think I went having this wonderfully delicious fantasy that it was going to be something like Julia Roberts in Eat, Pray, Love. It in fact was not like that at all. And so I'm sharing that for the benefit of this. I also went on this journey because of the generosity through the SCOM grant. And one of the specific requirements of the SCOM grant is that we reflect not only on what we learned, but that how it kind of relates to my life, my ministry, and sort of the ministry of the church as a whole. And so it sort of fulfills that obligation. Finally, while most of you here in the room are probably most interested in what life is like in the Anglican communion in Aotearoa, my whānau or family from Aotearoa are very curious about how they already know about their land. They're kind of curious about what I got out of it. And so that part of the presentation is also very much for their benefit. I will offer, again, completely unashamedly, that it is an extreme vulnerability to share your journal with a room full of people, even people that I consider beloved family and beloved community. There will be times that I will fight tears in some of the things that I will say. There will be times I will lose that battle. I already lost that battle once today. And some of the things you hear may sound very strange to you, and you may, well, quite frankly, you may judge me. I can't tell you how to feel. I will tell you that I don't really want to have a deep conversation about your judgment. So you can enjoy that and sit with it. And if you'd like to ask me more questions to understand it more deeply, I appreciate that. But I would ask you that you respect my vulnerability. I'm going to set this healthy boundary and enjoy your judgment on your own. So that having been said, I know everyone there, by the way, no one in Aotearoa is at all amazed that I am speaking in this way because they got to know me quite well. So the next slide might start right away. I kind of want to get into the name, because you'll hear me continuously call this Aotearoa. You know it as New Zealand. So where does this come from? Jacinthia, my host, who helped organize 90% of this trip and is online right now, and I love very dearly, introduced me to a video series. It's a 7-part series that I encourage you all to look at when you leave here today. It's called Land of the Long White Cloud. And I'm going to show you one of those videos, if it plays. The videos are short. I think the longest one is like 15 minutes. But it's a very interesting look. It is done entirely by Pakeha, or Caucasian European descent people. But it's done so because it's very much in the keeping with the spirit of kind of what I did, which is to go and grapple with and understand what the difficult and painful relationship the European descendants have with the Māori people, given the effects of colonization. And these people who make these videos were sort of struggling to try to figure out their role with that. So hopefully this first video works, and let's find out. Okay. So already we're not off to a good start because it's not. There we go. Okay.
This year marks the 250th anniversary of the first face-to-face meeting between tangata whenua and European sailors.
Captain James Cook's ship Endeavour coming to our shores for Tuia 250, the reenactment of Cook's journey.
The critics say spending $23 million to mark such a divisive moment is wrong.
Many years ago, we probably wouldn't even have been close to these conversations. It's hard as it is. There's people out there, I can just say the word treaty and their nostrils start to flare up. We are the problem. We always have been, since Cook arrived.
Yeah, who decided that we should do this?
I understand the resistance to commemorations of Cook's landing, or as some say, of that invasion and of that violence.
That term, Cook discovered New Zealand, just shocks me that people could think that and not seeing that the land had already been very well discovered. Thank you.
I don't know about that word commemorations and what we're actually doing and when we're just celebrating and glorifying something, because I think that whole heroising is absolutely wrong.
He arrived all right, but what happened after that has been horrendous for Māori. If we don't understand that in our hearts, then we'll never really move on as a nation, or as Pākehā, to put it in context as to the consequences of that.
Lead in the sun. Hello. Oh, hello, hello, hello. When I first made my way down to New Zealand in 1769, I was told to go and find the great unknown southern continent. Everyone was looking for it at the time, you know, the Dutch, the Spanish, the French. Hate the French. And basically the way it worked was the first one to get there and pop their flag down wins, all theirs. Yeah, that's colonization. Pop your flag down, bam, that's mine.
Inherent in this coming together in the process of Cook is this process of colonisation, which is a violent process aimed at destroying Indigenous people.
I don't think non-Māori realise the impact of colonisation on Māori and on themselves, on ourselves. When we don't even have an awareness, how can we then begin to take honourable action?
My ancestors came here, we took over, we murdered and plundered, we set up an agreement to try and work together and ignored that, because you try to give yourself permission about the past. Don't blame me, I didn't take the land, I didn't stop the language, it's not my fault. What I've done is maintained my privilege by ignoring the past.
It takes strength to go past guilt. And maybe it's helpful to realise that it's a self-indulgent excuse, in a way. It's good to be guilty when you first find out, I think, but to see it as a stage and not to stay there, and to change from guilt to responsibility.
I still do kind of struggle with the whole Pākehā paralysis kind of thing, like, oh, what if I, do something wrong?
Even just labelling it is a really important step, because once you've labelled it, then you can get over it and you can actually do something useful with it.
We've got to find a better way, a more caring way. We have to challenge ourselves.
The treaty is inspiring to me. It's a blueprint for how we can work together. And so that for me is the vision.
If we honour Te Treaty, we'd address so many of the issues that are facing this country in terms of the injustice and imbalance that we see. And so why wouldn't we do that? Because it'll create a better Aotearoa for everybody.
We have to be able to believe that we can do this, and history will show us that we can.
Anyway, that's all hindsight, To look back in the past, wonder what you could have done differently. I suppose I'm trying to think about how to incorporate hindsight into my day-to-day business, Sort of look back into the past and see what it informs in your actions in the future. Sort of like looking backwards in order to move forward. You're looking backwards in order to move forward. Right, so, okay, need a little bit of practice at that, don't I? Ha. Well, anyway, come on, let's go.
Does that sound like anything familiar to us? Whose name could we just insert in place of James Cook? Christopher Columbus. And how long was that a thing in the US that we got Columbus Day off? And that was a thing for a really long time. I mean, I don't remember when it became Indigenous Persons Day in our country, but fairly recently in my life in the grand scheme of things. And so this, what you saw amongst those Pākehā individuals, that was the journey that I was walking. So we watched these videos in my first week. I don't really remember exactly the day. It's a bit of a blur. I will say of the 3 months I was there, this presentation is going to focus a lot on the first week. And Jacinthia is probably laughing right now. It's entirely her fault. And she knows this, and I say this all the time. Jacinthia hit me with a fire hose to the face for the first week. It was a lot of culture every single day from the second I got off the plane, and she took me to St. John's College to go to communion and have Eucharist. It was already, we were off and running. And so this part of what you'll hear in my journal is this struggle with figuring out and working through my own feelings of basically white guilt, which I think we talk about a lot in this country. So this is a picture of Jacinthia, and this is a map of New Zealand. So Jacinthia, the way this whole thing came to pass is I'm going to be thanking people throughout. So I'll start by thanking Dr. Ben King. So the way this came about for me was in Dr. King's class, I was asked to write a reflection on kind of how the church affected a culture other than my own. And having lived in Hawaii for 10 years, I chose to write my paper about that experience. And it kind of just got my brain going. And then we read an article by Jenny Tapa about how the Anglican Church in New Zealand was working through enculturation of Māori traditions and how the Māori had been enculturating Anglican traditions and how that was all worked out. And I just sort of had a Holy Spirit moment and said, that's it, I want to go to New Zealand. and began talking with Father Richard about how to make this happen. And long story short, the two gentlemen connected me with the Reverend Claire Barry and the Reverend Brenda Rockall, who are demon students of ours from New Zealand. Through conversation with them and realizing that I did not want to go to New Zealand and have what I would call a Pakeha experience, they put me in touch with Jacinthia. Jacinthia was a godsend. There is no one in the Māori Anglican Church who does not know Jacinthia. And I know she's laughing. So Jacinthia helped organize several portions of this trip, and we'll get to some of the portions of the trip that I kind of worked with some of her other connections to make happen on my own once I got there. But that area that's highlighted in red up at the top of the map, that's kind of this north part of the island, that's Auckland. That was, for all intents and purposes, our sort of starting point. So here are just some basic vocabulary words that I don't expect you to remember. But these are some words that you're going to hear me use. And I'm going to just read through them. So te reo is the Māori language. Tikanga is culture, and I'm going to talk about the 3 tikanga system that they have in Aotearoa. Pakeha. Pakeha means different things to different people. Kind of like haole in Hawaiian. For all intents and purposes, the original meaning of Pakeha back in the day when it was the English settlers was English people, right? England, Great Britain, those people. European descent, non-Maori. Nowadays, even though non-Maori could mean if you were of Asian descent, that makes you a Pakeha, most people don't use it in that way. Pakeha is still traditionally used by most people to mean a white or European descendant. So I was sort of a Pakeha, sort of. Karakia, prayer. Kai is food. Wairua, spirit. Tapu is sacred. Put them together. Wairua tapu. What do you think that means? Holy Spirit. There you go. Urupai is a burial ground. Mihingare is the Anglican Church. Marae is a meeting place. Whenua is the land, and whānau, which you hear me continually calling the folks in New Zealand are whānau to me. They've become my family. So as I mentioned, the first place that Jacinthia took me, okay, or I didn't. There we go. Is St. John's Theological College. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this presentation was originally 3 hours, so we're going to move through some slides very quickly. But by and large, this is the Anglican seminary in Aotearoa. We're going to talk about St. John's a lot, and some of its limitations and some of its strengths. So I just want to make that aware. On my very first day, we went and visited this, and then Jacinthia took me to 2 other places. So she took me to the Mangere Town Center, and I just would like you to look at the picture of the Mangere Town Center. Oh yes, that is Run DMC. And then I would like you to look at the Sylvia Park Mall. Any observations of differences? Let me ask a question in a different way. Where do you suppose the persons of color are more likely to be found? And where do you suppose the Pakeha are more likely to be found? The Pakeha are going to the Sylvia Park Mall. When we went to the Mangere Town Center, it's largely run by Asian merchants. I got a lot of looks. People were definitely, I mean, it wasn't that crowded, but people were definitely kind of looking at me like why I was there. In the Sylvia Park Mall, no one noticed my existence whatsoever. But you can kind of see, look at the great windows and the bright light from the outside, as opposed to kind of the industrial lighting and the hard concrete floor. It just kind of, there's a definite divide. So right away, we went on a pilgrimage. And this is where we're going to start our talk from my journal. So this is a group of wonderful people. Shannon, Susanna, and Andrew are friends of Jacinthia. And we all went on this pilgrimage together, all up through kind of the North Country. And this was, we left on my 3rd day there. So there was a lot in week 1. Some of these places I'm going to have to hit really quickly. But I do want to show you Tane Mahuta. So in the creation story of the Māori people, Tane Mahuta was one of, I think, 9 children, and he separated his parents by pushing up on his father and pushing down with his feet on his mother to separate Father Sky and Mother Earth. They were together, the world was dark, they held their children within them, and there was decision of talk amongst the children that they wanted to let in the light and they wanted to separate. Not all the children wanted to, it created some drama later, but Tane Mahuta separated Ranganui from Papatuanuku, which is Mother Earth, Father Sky. Rangi is Papa Sky and Papatuanuku is Mother Earth, and he separated the two. And so he is represented in this tree is named for him. This tree is dated to be at least 2,000 years old. So it was a very powerful experience for me to stand amongst something that was here in the time of Christ. And be a part of their creation story. And it was sort of the first, sad as it is to say, it was the first introduction for me to this concept of how beautiful it could be for us to embrace assorted creation stories and not just, you know, Adam and Eve. So from here, we moved on to the St. Isaac's Retreat Center. And St. Isaac's is a lovely retreat center. It's in Opononi near Hokianga. It is managed by Morano, is not the woman in the bright green jacket. And the bright green jacket is their resident nun, Sister Anne. This is a Franciscan retreat center. Sister Anne is an Anglican sister, but from the Franciscan order. And so here is where we're going to kind of pick up my first journal entry. Okay. I do not have, I'm going to show you another picture because it's kind of where we're headed. Okay. We arrive at the signal station and Jacynthia gives us a history lesson. Hawaiki Panamao, the originating place and the place to which all will return. It sounds like heaven. I am drawn to this idea. I find the history exhausting, but this part I feel connected to and want to hear more about. A 3 days long process on the marae is what they do for the tangi. Tangi means to cry. This is when someone dies.
Hello. By the way, only one of my pictures are unstapled in my magazine, but only one.
Only one. The others are all stapled, all right?
That would be
okay, okay. That's good to hear. Hey, babe.
I took a second till I was like, okay, that's British. That's not New Zealand. Okay, might not cry now. Thanks, Dr. King. The Wairua, or spirit, goes on to Hawaiki Panamao. The whenua, which means land. The pito is a piece of the umbilical cord. It is buried there. There's so much to remember. It's hard not knowing the language, and I really wish I had learned more before I came. Sometimes the translating is done really well, and sometimes it seems that everyone else knows what's going on but me. It is disorienting, but more than that, it's lonely. It was a beautiful day by the water, and the lessons about the dying and funerals were lovely. As I walk away, I am emotionally overwhelmed. I can't get my thoughts straight, but I know for sure that I feel a deep loneliness and a longing that I cannot name. That was from May 16th. I arrived on the 12th. We went on a hike later. I am unashamed about climbing on all fours. I will not fall backwards that way. But oh my God, my calves have never burned that bad in all of the pelotons in all of my life. I wasn't going to be the fastest, nor would I be the slowest, but I would not get to look around much either, not until I reached the top. We were climbing the Pawhiriri of Rahiri. Rahiri was the son of Tauromoko and Te Huanga'iangi, sorry. Tauromoko was a descendant of Kupe, and so Kupe was given credit for discovering for the Māori people. Rahiri is considered the founding ancestor of the North Auckland Māori people. His pa was very impressive, and it was absolutely breathtaking. The wind was a little overwhelming, but the sky and water were just spectacular. Jacynthia gives us more history. I struggle to hear over the wind, but the experience was not affected. I cognitively knew I was somewhere special, somewhere that not a lot of people trek to. Yet I didn't know how to feel about it. I felt like an imposter, but at the same time, I was drawn into the beauty and the humbleness I felt as I sat in the wet grass. There is a small space of land that is visible from here. The spot of land was sold by someone, we don't know who, to the Wesleys. This is where the Methodist Church began in Aotearoa. I immediately think of Dr. Wright and smile. Somehow, despite not being a Methodist myself, this little moment of familiarity with a friend comforts me and dissipates the loneliness a little. After we get our history and look around some more, it will be time to climb down. Most of the stories involve how the Europeans lied and either stole Māori land or benefited from a misunderstanding and took Māori land. I'm saddened by this for a number of reasons. Obviously, it is sad for its own sake. It doesn't matter if I did or my ancestors did, it still makes me sad. It makes me sadder, though, to consider the fact that I just didn't know about this. I know what the history books would have said, and in reality, I never read a history book about New Zealand. But it isn't the Maori that I'm thinking of. I don't really know the history of the land I call home. I know what I've been told, and if ever there was a case of fake news to be had, one could surely see it in the history books I've been given. I'm sad for my country, and I'm sad for me. I have had the luxury of living in ignorance for a really long time. Now that I know a thing, I cannot unknow it. I don't know how to get involved in what I now know, but I also can't see how I don't get involved. My head spins as I consider it, and I decide to focus on my dissent. Trying to stay in the present is all I can do at the moment. So from there, we went back to St. Isaac's. So this is a lovely picture of the Hokianga Harbor. We went back to St. Isaac's and we got engaged in a series of conversations, and we talked about Jesus and we talked about a lot of things. And people had a lot of curiosity about me, which was lovely. By the second day, after we had done some prayer, we began to talk again, and I pick up there. When we return to St. Isaac's, it is time for evening prayer and dinner. Prayer is lovely, but Sister Anne won't be joining us for dinner. Over dinner, we're talking. People are asking about my project again, and I'm trying to put into words the questions I am pondering. I begin to reflect on the United States. I'm angry, and I share that. There is a chuckle and an acknowledgement of my anger. It is suggested that they already knew I was angry and were beginning to wonder if I even liked the US. I stopped to consider this. I do like the US, but I can't call it that anymore. We are not united. I can say America or the States, but that's it. By the way, I have since learned I can't say America either. Furthermore, I share that I have been annoyed since coming to New Zealand by all the American crap. Somehow, New Zealand, the country, was letting me down. I don't know why I vomited this information all over them. I'd like to chalk it up to how tired I was. I apologized and told them I was loving their company tremendously. I was just really frustrated. One of my companions, Shannon, asked if I was frustrated because they were human. This was cold water on my head. I tried quickly to say that it wasn't. But was it? People on left, right, and center all chimed in, offering different perspectives and trying, I think, to make my experience and my comments make sense to me. They were all being so loving, and I missed most of what they said because I sat there feeling ashamed of myself. Moranu says something about how we, meaning Americans or non-New Zealanders, view Aotearoa, and it hit me hard. I asked if I could say something before everyone headed off to bed. I offered an apology. I tried to apologize for the way I had expressed myself, but it was more than that. What I offered, what I suddenly was very aware of, was that my entire reaction stemmed from the colonialism I brought with me. I came to New Zealand with an idea of what it was going to be like, what I was going to learn, and how it was going to fit my needs. Now, when it was different, when, like Shannon suggested, it was human, I get all pissy and whine. I realized more than ever before in my life that when I get uncomfortable or disappointed, I resorted to anger and frustration. I was so disappointed in myself, I could have run away in that moment if I'd had anywhere to run to. My friends were gracious and kind and suggested that just maybe I should give myself some grace on this 5th day of my travels. My gut's still really bruised, but I had to agree with them. My heart had already been very flung about and very challenged and overwhelmed by all it had seen, heard, and experienced. This is what I came for, to confront things and to become uncomfortable. I see tremendous value in these lessons. I don't know if my friends understood or not, my pain in this uncomfortableness was not just because I was out of my element. I was uncomfortable because I realized in this moment that I could identify with people in my life whom I had othered as being despicable and wrong. I wasn't any longer learning how to grow and change and learn so that I could teach some great lesson back home. I was growing and changing and learning so I could teach some great lesson to myself. Ugh, 3 months of this now seems like a really, really long time. So again, that was day 5. Thanks again, Cynthia. Appreciate it. Love you. It was overwhelming. And I offer that because if you've never spent time other than as a tourist in another country, then it's really hard to wrap your head around that. And it's very different the length of time you go. This was 5 days. And so like, it's amazing. I only had that profound an experience because Cynthia holding my hand and going with me the whole way was like, we're gonna go in the deep end now. And she didn't coddle me and she took me there. So I kind of got a really quick immersion, whereas I think for other people, it might take the full months to get that. But for those of you who have not yet experienced another culture, I encourage you to do it and do it for a chunk of time. Because if you don't, then you're really just kind of walking along the periphery. You have to sink in to be able to know and walk in the pain, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And my entire journey, if I were to sum it up in one word, is that it was uncomfortable. It was very difficult to come home and have people say to me, did you just have the best time? And I was like, yeah, kind of. People asked me if I had fun. At times, I mean, this was not a miserable experience, but that would be an inappropriate way to characterize it. That's not what this was. And to say that I just had fun, to me, cheapens everything that the people I was there to learn from brought to it. So I offer that, which is why you're not getting a slideshow of just a bunch of pretty pictures. Because this was a people and a people who had suffered and who were so incredibly gracious to walk with me and say, we're going to kind of drag you into our misery and our hurt and our pain, and you're going to feel kind of crappy about it, but we love you and we want you to learn and we're glad you're here. And to sit in the tension of that was the entire 3 months. So I'm going to take a sidetrack. I did not talk about this in my last presentation, but we're going to talk about it today. Jacynthia's grandmother is Finna Cooper. Anybody know who Finna Cooper is? I did not think so. I didn't either. And I think I told Jacinthia this, but if not, sorry. So in the early part of the trip, Jacinthia took me on a marae, and we'll talk a little bit more about marae later, but there was a picture, kind of like a pedestrian crossing picture, and I might have one in here somewhere, but it was a picture of an older woman holding the hand of a child, and Jacinthia was like, it's my grandmother. And I thought, sure it is, right? Like, I absolutely was just judgy. I was polite, and I was like, okay, but I was like, whatever. No, because that's the woman. So when you see that woman, the statue right there, well, I'm pointing there, is Jacynthia's grandmother, Finna, and holding the hand of a child. That is on her marae. And then the picture in the pink headdress is actually her. So if you ever go to New Zealand and you see those signs, that was really Finna Cooper. I don't have time to do Finna justice, but I'm going to talk a little bit about her because I think that Jacinthia deserves that to honor her family. She was a powerful woman, which I really love about her. She was a member of the Roman Catholic Church. In her family, she was, first of all, obviously female, and she had older male brothers, and yet her father seemed to kind of gravitate more to her and elevated her status in the family quite a bit, and she became very powerful. So one of the things that you learn about the marae is, by and large, in meetings, men speak, women don't. And Finna sort of broke that a little bit, and she kind of got very vocal. Likewise, and I believe that this is very true amongst the Native Americans as well, there was a lot of land grab. And it wasn't just the seizing of land, it was taking advantage of the impoverished lives that the Maori people were living in and forcing them to sell. and being able to grab up as much native land as they could by non-Māori people. And Whina sort of stood up to that, and basically was like, no more. And she organized this land march, which happened in 1975. And I want to say that she was about 80. She might have been a little older than that. And she basically marched the entire length of the North Island, down from the north all the way down to the capital. And this massive group of people, and it was in essence a protest to the stealing of the land and the taking of it. I recognize that that's a difficult thing to do in a country of this size. There was many moments on this trip to go, just so you can have some frame of reference, the entire country of Aotearoa would fit inside Colorado. So there were many conversations about how different life is in a country of 350 million people versus a country of 5. So there are things that are difficult to find how would we organize something like that. But Whina was a remarkable woman, and Jacynthia is a testament to her ancestry. She lives up to her whakapapa, and she took us to Whina's grave. I was able to kneel at her grave and pray with her. And I will share, it was humbling, and I felt like an intruder. But I was nonetheless honored to be on her urapai and to be able to be at her grave in her final resting place. And I thank Jacynthia for sharing her family with me. And you can also look up the movie Whina and learn more about her. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, I have to move us along. So we are going to leave my original time with Jacynthia, and I am now going on the road. So that takes us to the Reverend Mari Collins. Mari lives in Otapi. I flew into Palmerston North, so we are now down much more in the southern part of the North Island, not quite all the way to the capital. And so I spent some time with Mari, and we're going to talk about what I did there. I don't know why this next slide is here. It's out of place, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. So this is a koru. And I'm going to just talk about, it just shouldn't be where it is. Basically speaking, it was just very impressive that I was able to get this picture because it requires time. And this is what unfurls to create a palm frond, right? To create the ferns, rather. And so I have, and Cynthia bought me this, you will see images of the koru everywhere. It's a symbol of kind of this ongoing life that they have there. It's very, very sacred for them. It's a very important part of their history. And so when the plant all unfolds, it allows us in the fern to see the different layers. So in the very beginning, it represents the grandchildren, and then the top layer would be the children. And then when you get down, this is a little morbid, but when you get down to the branches that are dying and about to fall off, those are the grandparents. But so it represents their whole cycle of life. And so it's a very important plant to them. You will see it depicted a lot in their art. You will see it depicted a lot in their tattoos. It's just very significant. It's an out of place slide, but there you have it. So Rangiatea is one of the oldest churches, if not the oldest church, and this was Mari's church. So here we're going to talk a little bit about the differences in community. So there is a 3 tikanga system, a 3 cultural system. This is very different from any other part of the Anglican communion. So we have Michael Curry. They have 3 bishops that make up Michael Curry. Okay, they're called archbishops. And one represents the Tikanga Pakeha, or the more European descent church. One would represent Tikanga Māori and Tikanga Pacifica. So everybody has their own bishop. It's not like you can't go to a different church, but they're governed differently. The problem that I started to discover is how, by the time I got here to Rangiatea, is when it starts to become incredibly stark how different the money is. There was a big pool of money, and 3 guesses as to who controls the big pot of money, and start splitting it up amongst the 3 tikanga. And I will tell you, it is not divided a third, a third, a third. That's not how it goes. All of the churches are in need of some repair, but interestingly enough, a lot of the churches that were originally Māori that were seized by Pākehā, when they got to the point that they were dilapidated and falling down, were being given back to the Māori with no money to repair them. A lot of these churches don't have plumbing. Most don't have heat. And so some of them were becoming quite dilapidated. And there was like this great divide because there's a lot of Māori people who want their buildings back. And then there's a lot that are like, just say no. Like, we don't need to keep adopting financial burden. And so we saw this a lot. Mari, she does a lot of work in training new priests. But yet she is, for our language, she's the rector of this church. Māori priests serving in their churches do not get stipended. There is no salary for a Māori priest. This is not the case in Tikanga Pākehā. They are stipended. Māori gets paid because of work she does outside of the church itself. I mean, she's working for the church, but she works outside of her rectorship. She works training other priests, so she gets paid for that. She does not get paid for any of her pastoral care. She doesn't get paid for having Eucharist. She doesn't get paid for preaching. And she doesn't get her rectory for free. So the vicarage, which is a very large house next door where we stayed, Māori has to pay for, and she has to pay for her utilities. This is not how it is for us. This is not how it is in Tikanga Pākehā. It's a very important distinction. So Jacinthia was hired by Tikanga Pākehā, and when I stayed with her in her vicarage, that was paid for by the church and her utilities were paid for. And so there's this great discrepancy. Likewise, many of the Māori people don't have the financial resources to travel to St. John's College. It's not that there are no Māori people there. And St. John's College is set up with the 3 Tikanga systems. So there's Tikanga Pākehā, Tikanga Māori, and Tikanga Pacifica, and they all lead different Eucharistic services. So they're all getting exposed. They all learn te reo. Like, it is embedded in that. But the vast majority of Māori priests just got tapped by a bishop. So when I went to Māori's church, we were at priest training because many of the former priest of that area, the former bishop of that area would tag someone and say, I'm going to ordain you like next week. And they would get ordained without training because they were short, they needed priests. And so many of these priests, and they're lovely, lovely people, and they are so eager and so happy to serve, and haven't been given the basic liturgical understanding that we take for granted. And so they offer these schools periodically to get that to be balanced. And the conversations that Mari and I had are centered around this idea of, isn't that kind of a way that Pākehā can always look at Māori priests as being less than them? You didn't go to the same seminary, you don't have the same formal training, you're not quite the same priest that I am. And doesn't that forever create this divide and this justification for the lack of financial equity and the lack of resources? And by and large, the Māori priests that I spoke to said yes. So that was my assessment and added to me being a little angry. This is pictures from Otaki Beach. This was, I don't know, maybe about a mile from where Mari lived. And this was my beginning of my relationship with water. This is the first time I went kind of off by myself and sat and just meditated, and I watched the sunset here. And as you can see, it's pretty amazing to sit and watch a sunset here. And for me, I just started having this very strange relationship with water, and I was seeing animals in the water. So as I sat, and remember, this was winter, so I was quite bundled. And I was sitting way off from the water, and I had this overwhelming sense that I needed to approach the water. And they were just, it was low tide. They were like, 6-inch ripples in the water. This was nothing to get excited about. But I had this overwhelming sense when I walked down there was not many people on the beach, that somehow all the ripples seemed to be coming towards me. I don't know that this was true, but this was my perception. And they all look like puppies. So you can just imagine a gaggle of like 6 or 7 Labrador or Labradoodle puppies. You know how they kind of run with that wild enthusiasm? They like trip over their own feet. That is what the waves look like for me. And I began talking to the water, and it became one of the most important friends that I had on this trip. Because the great thing about visiting a country that's an island, there's a lot of water. So, and I would, depending on the day and the weather, I would see different animals in the water. And so I saw puppies, horses, and buffalo, depending on the size of the wave. You could kind of figure out where they were. And so it was just this really powerful experience. And somewhere along the lines, we went to this one talk, and I don't know which one of my hosts took me. I have no idea. One of them will remember. But we went to this talk about the importance of water to the Maori people. And this woman was speaking about how during all of the flooding that they had had at the end of 22, water was coming up into her home through this pipe. And they recognized water as a living thing, which I think is a very beautiful, symbolic, baptismal understanding of water. So I really appreciated that. So she began to talk to the water. And with respect, acknowledged the water and said, you know, do what you have to do, but if you could spare the home, I would appreciate it. And she had to go and do something else, go help other people. And when she came back, the water had carved a path around her home. It had receded from her home and had carved a path around it. Some people will choose to say all kinds of scientific reasons for why that happened, or that it's a coincidence, or whatever. And it began my struggle with how often we try to talk ourselves out of things of faith or things that are just divinely inspired because we want to, because we're uncomfortable with the reality that something else might be true. I decided to just live in that because the water was talking to me, and I was having that experience before I heard that story. So after that, I was just affirmed that the Lord was speaking to me through water, and if it wasn't for water, I would have cried a lot. Because it was, I cried a lot. I don't have a ton of time to talk about these next slides, but this is these are represented also on my shirt. This is a shirt I got from Mari. And when she was doing the priest training, part of what they're trying to do in this enculturation is how do we bring traditional Maori values into the practice of Anglicanism. And so again, I don't have a ton of time for this. I'm happy to talk about it, but as you can see, they do that work in a way that I think we're more afraid to do. So look at various Native American, Latino American, African American cultures and say, where can there be a blend? It seems very common in the Episcopal Church that we say, this is what we believe, and everyone needs to kind of just get that. And I think we're moving away from that, but I loved being in this presentation and seeing them embrace this idea of what we believe doesn't have to just be left at the door. This idea that, again, they already had God. Everyone I spoke to kind of put it the same way. We always knew God. It just took a while for us to know his son, Jesus, or that we didn't know that he had a son. And so they kind of embrace that. And this is their way of that enculturation. So again, we already are pushing it on time. So I have to kind of move through this. I'm happy to share my slides with anyone who wants to see them, but they do go quite in depth into, this is Mari's church. That's me preaching at Mari's church. But they go to great lengths to kind of talk about their culture. I had to move, I'm moving on. So I had to leave. I was with Mari about 6 days. And then I flew way up to the north to stay with Archdeacon Fran and her husband, Rapiata Hokianga, 2 priests. Archdeacons are priests. I don't know if this is true everywhere in the Episcopal Church, perhaps with Julie, you know, because all the archdeacons I know in the Episcopal Church are deacons. Do we also have archdeacons who are priests in the Episcopal Church? Okay. I've only met archdeacons who are deacons. Fran covers almost that entire, if not more than that entire territory that is highlighted up there. Again, doesn't get paid for any of that. To give you a sense of what happens in Fran's life, so a tangi, which again, it means to cry, but it's also kind of how they refer to their funeral celebration, is a 3 days long celebration of life. And it doesn't always, but it typically happens on the marae. And in the year before I got there, she had done 100 tangi. So basically speaking, she was a part of a funeral for 300 days out of the year. And I just think to myself what that would be like, because these are long processes. In the 3 months that I was there, and they wanted me to leave because I became known as sort of this manuhiri of death, I did 7 tangi. That was a lot of funerals. Not all of them were 3 days long, praise God, but it was a lot. And it was very overwhelming. And Fran and Rapiata do it with such love and such grace. Rapiata is, everyone tried to help me with my reo. Rapiata gets the most credit. I was with them for 10 days, and every day Rapiata had a Māori te reo lesson. So he made me learn, he made me practice. And it came in very handy as I moved around. But this is the far north. I'm going to go through the next few slides because it's just more on their values and we don't have time for that. But I do want to stop on this picture for just a second. So this is Cape Reinga, and it is at the very, very top of the North Island. And this is where, when they would release at Hokianga Harbor, which you saw way back from day 5, they would release the person's wairua, their spirit, at that place. And it would go around Hokianga, and here at Cape Reinga, where they say 2 oceans meet, the spirit would go on to Hawaii Panau. And so it's a little bit of a misnomer, I'm not gonna lie. And I think if I go one more slide, you might see it move. It's very hard to see, but if you can kind of see where the white is, it's basically where the Pacific Ocean, and I want to make sure I get all of and the Tasman Sea collide. And it is very obvious when you're standing there to see 2 currents going in 2 different directions. And I could have stayed there all day. As it happens, we would normally say going to see something like this on a bright, sunshiny day is lovely. It actually isn't great for seeing this. If you ever have the opportunity to go on a stormy day, because then the current is making big waves and it's really, really powerful. But there was a sense when I was there that I was somehow standing at the start of creation for me. Like, it just felt like such a creation moment to be there and to see this churning of the water, and the colors were so phenomenal. It was just an amazing experience. And then Mother Julia comes into the conversation. So these are, again, my hostess is still there. I was walking back on my own. It's a pretty good walk. And channeling my Mother Julia, my inner Mother Julia, I decided to make, I chose to make use of this time for contemplative prayer. And I didn't have any with me, but I was praying the Anglican rosary as I was walking. I didn't know how else to honor the space. I felt like if I just walked back, I was going to leave something behind that I wanted to take with me, and being in contemplative prayer made much more sense to me. And so I got about halfway through my recitation when I came upon Rapiata, because he had stopped talking to people, so he wasn't with me, but he was kind of looking for me, and then we were walking back together. And as it turns out, they had never prayed the Anglican rosary. So he asked if he could pray with me, and we walked along together out loud, praying the Anglican rosary for the rest of our walk. And it was this really special bonding moment for he and I. And when we got to the end of our walk, as we would be kind of going through, it gets to the point where we were now saying the Lord's Prayer. And he said it in Te Reo, and I said it in English. And I had such an overwhelming emotional release and sobbed ugly cries. And he and I just sort of collapsed into each other and had this really powerful hug and this exchange of just understanding, just this opportunity to be in each other's space and to have this mutual share of learning and this mutual share of just love of God and love of Christ, which I think was really fabulous. I'm just looking to see if I need anything else to share there. No, not yet. Okay. I was with them for about 10 days. And then my journey continued and I flew on to see the Reverend Bettina Maxwell. And you can see her area highlighted there. Bettina was the next person I was with the longest. I was with Bettina for about 3 weeks, which was great to kind of be settled. Weird to be somebody's house guest for 3 weeks, not gonna lie. But if you're gonna be anyone's house guest, I highly recommend Bettina Maxwell because she was lovely. Bettina lives in Aotearoa, and that other word, in case you're wondering how to say it, is Whakatane. So if you have ever watched The Volcano on Netflix, if not, watch it. It's incredibly powerful and wildly depressing. But it is about the volcano on White Island and the eruption that happened in 2019, killing a lot of people. And it is off the shores of Whakatane. And from Bettina's home, you can see the island. So it was kind of always there, just sort of lurking, this sort of, there were people who were killed in this volcanic explosion, whose remains could never be recovered. And so they're still there. And so there was this sense of looking out there and always feeling like you were kind of, if you've ever been to the Pearl Harbor Memorial in Hawaii, it was very much like that, where you just knew you were, even though it was there and I was here, that it was sacred ground and that people had died basically needlessly. And so anyway, I have a picture of it coming up in a bit. Bettina, the Te hui amarangi e te manawa o te wheke. So this is, for all intents and purposes, this was Bettina's diocese, and they were having their meeting and their priest training. They also gave me some lovely te reo lessons, which I appreciated, because they were working with everyone on te reo. Much like the Native Americans, many Māori people were forbidden from learning their language, who are still alive today. When I was staying, if you go back to a few guest hosts ago, when I was staying with Māori, there were lovely women who were staying there who were learning te reo, and they were going to a te reo school. And the one woman who was staying there, a young girl, whose name escapes me, but she was of Māori descent. The other woman was not. She was had lived in New Zealand as a Pakeha and now lived in Canada. But she said that she couldn't go home and practice her te reo, not because I think anyone wouldn't have allowed her, but it brought great shame to her Māori father that he didn't know the language and that she knew it better. And so she carried that. And so what I think is lovely is that when this particular Amarangi get together, they acknowledge the fact that not everybody has the language. And so they had classes for whatever level you were at, and they took me into their beginner class, and I'm very grateful. The picture that you see in the middle there is where Queen Elizabeth came, and the Crown came to apologize for the fact the Māori people have the Treaty of Waitangi, and I don't, sadly, because it's a very important part of their history, I don't have a ton of time to talk about it, but it is a place in which the Crown, it was somewhat misleading, for sure. And yet at the same time, they're kind of the only Indigenous people that have ever had a treaty with sort of their colonizers. And surprise, surprise, over the years, the Crown has not held up their end. And so the center picture is where the Crown came to apologize for that. I'm just gonna leave that there. Okay, beautiful pictures. This is the inside of one of the churches that I went to visit in Hinamoa. This is one of their hot springs. We didn't go in that. I didn't want to be boiled. But Bettina had taken me to lunch, and we had this view, and this is where one of the hot springs kind of did their thing. So it's just a cool picture. I should these are not both White Island. The picture in the sunset is White Island. And they're gonna yell at me, but I don't actually remember the name of the other island, which is why it says White Island, and I don't even remember, I'm sorry. But we looked at them every day and it was lovely. And this is just so you know, these pictures are taken from Bettina's porch. Like, she had a great view. Bettina's marae, because I was there so long. So this is, her iwi is called Naitai. And they were incredibly, incredibly generous. And I got to celebrate sort of the equivalent, if you will, of their new year, which is Matariki. And I'll try to talk a little bit about that. But I wanna, you get what they call, when you're brought onto a marae, you need to be, I don't think this should really be a word, but you need to be pulfitted onto the marae. And it is where, this is a moment where the women begin. And so the women, what would happen is, women of that marae stand at the entryway to their meeting house and they chant. And the idea of this was kind of to figure out if you were friend or foe. And so a representative of your group was chanting a response back. And you would proceed forward slowly and stop periodically along the way for the chant to continue. So every time we went to a tangi on a marae, we had to be pofiri'd on. And it's an incredibly, I may at some point have a video from when we did it at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, but it's not something I could have videoed. That would have been disrespectful. But it's an incredibly powerful experience to go through that. When I visited Bettina's marae for the first time, it was the first time for me to be pofiri'd onto a marae by myself. And Bettina was doing the chant, but I was the only person coming onto the marae. And so it was a very naked moment. It was a very like, I am absolutely a marohiri. I am absolutely a newcomer. And so, and it was just beautiful and it was powerful. And everything is happening in Te Reo, and I know some of the language and I don't know some of the language. But I was welcomed on. I didn't understand the profundity of that moment until days later. At Matariki, this marae Ngatai was hosting, so that is a picture of their meeting house, their marae. That banner is not usually there. It was just there for Matariki. Matariki, they celebrate a lot of it, they're celebrating their deceased in a lot of ways, but it's more than that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. But there will be a lot of visitors. And so I was very confused on the morning of where I go. And when you are sitting in the meeting house, there's the whānau side, which is the family, and then there's the manuhiri side for the guests. And so I'm, back in the kitchen and I'm chatting with people and we're drinking our, I don't know, millionth cup of tea, a lot of tea, tea and cookies all day long. And in this particular occasion, tea and dried eels, just saying, at 11 o'clock in the morning. It was a lot. And so I didn't know where to go. I felt very awkward. And so I said, okay, so should I go out and come in with the guests? And they were like, no, you're whānau now. You have been pohiri'd onto our marae. You are part of our whānau. And big lump, lots of tears, many cries. They then had me sitting here, right by the door, for those of you on Zoom and can't see it, but right by the entryway to the meeting house, next to their elders, next to the oldest women of their congregation or their whānau, as the manuhiri were coming on. So it was a seat of honor, is kind of the point. I felt very awkward. It was one, again, this idea of liminal space comes up a lot. It was very much for me a sense of holding in tension the feeling of honor of being there and the feeling of discomfort of not thinking that I deserved to be there and feeling that I belonged. None of which they made me feel. And I'm thinking, okay. All right, so I'm going to share a little bit about Matariki. July 14th. Matariki. Today is all about Matariki. This is the Māori New Year, a time to remember the family they lost in the past year and to look to the stars to help them prepare for what kind of year is coming. Will the crops grow well? Will the sea or ocean produce good catches? Will it be rainy or windy? Things like that. It is a really cool holiday, and this is only the second year that it has been an official New Zealand holiday. It is exciting to be a part of this experience on a marae. I am not considered a visitor today. Today, I am family. That feeling overwhelms me at the start of the day. I am joyous and tearful and feel really blessed. A few people have said to me, what a privilege this is for you to get to experience all this on a marae. They are right, of course. No one said this to me sounding judgmental or harsh at all. Still, after the second time someone said something, I started to feel weird. The celebration is beautiful. The stories and singing are lovely, but once again, that now familiar feeling starts to overtake me. I am almost in pain. I feel so lonely. It's hard to smile and stay focused. I don't belong here. No one treats me that way. The people who made the earlier comments didn't mean to make me feel that way. I think they're all finding me respectful of their customs and traditions, and I don't think anyone minds me being here, but I don't belong. Tomorrow morning will come very early. We will be back at the marae by 5 a.m. We will spend time looking at the stars and studying Matariki. I'm genuinely excited about it. This is still an amazing opportunity and experience. I love these people and this marae. I wish Ngākai could adopt me into their iwi. I wish I was as important to them as they are to me, but that is not the case. They have their whānau and their hapu, and I am a manuhiri. Even if they adopt me into their lives, I will always be outside, or at least I will feel that way. I can care about this place, this culture, these people, with all that I am for the rest of my life, and their history will still never be mine. What am I meant to do with this fabulous revelation? Now I know that I am homesick. I'm not missing actual home or the people that I know that I have. Rather, I am homesick for a home I don't think, and a people that I don't think I have ever known or had. I want a place. I want someone to love me and need me and complete me. I want a place that is mine and that I can feel safe and belonged to. I want to have a people, friends, family, people who get me and who I can build traditions with and have celebrations and stories with. I have no stories of my own. I have no whakapapa. I have no connection. And I ache so deeply. It was a very difficult experience. And obviously I have come to not so much feel that way anymore. I have people in this room. But I think that as I was learning, this is part of what I think is some of the problem that we have with Native Americans. There's a connection to this land that those of us of European descent don't have. But yet at the same time, Long Island is the home I grew up in, and it's the home that I know. And so to feel as though I don't have that, and that I can't honor that, is always somewhat sitting in tension. And so when I said earlier that I felt that I could identify with people who I had chosen to other and abhor, there was a part of me that suddenly had an understanding, not an agreement, not an acceptance, but an understanding of people who fight against this idea that they need to give land back, or that they can't practice a certain cultural tradition that they always knew and have always had. That is the whakapapa that they know. That is the tradition that they know. And now we're unpacking the fact that that whakapapa, that tradition, that genealogy was created in pain. And it's a difficult thing to understand. And I think that sitting with it for 3 months was really hard. And I don't think a lot of the people who we other as being abhorrent do take the time to sit in the discomfort. They get uncomfortable and then they push back. And they don't try to just process that sitting in tension with, yes, this is the history that you've always known. I remember being a child and making pilgrim hats and Indian headbands for Columbus Day or for Thanksgiving. And I'm not proud of that, but it's a part of who I am. And I had to sit with that. And I think that when we don't do that, as I'm looking at when I talk about this being the them, the we, them, the I, and the us, this is the us. If we, and I'm talking mostly to the people in this room and other US folks online, if we continue to simply other the people in our country who are saying and holding and clinging to some really abhorrent beliefs about our relationship with Native Americans or Latino Americans or African Americans, and we don't listen, then we are just still othering. And I don't know that we're furthering the conversation, and I don't know that we're improving things. So this is where Dr. Thompson comes into this presentation. Those of us in the room who had already taken moral theology remember reading Stand Your Ground. And I told Dr. Thompson this last semester. I talked about Stand Your Ground more than anything else there. And as much as I would love to say that the thing that got me through this pain, because it was painful, this sadness and this loneliness was pastoral theology or liturgics or even church history, as Dr. King, it was moral theology that got me through. It was sitting with the discussions that we had about how difficult it is to make sense of these ethical dilemmas, is to not see everything as being black and white, and to sit with this understanding that, yes, lousy things have happened, and that's still our history, and we have to sit with that and decide how to move forward. And I drew upon a lot of the lessons in moral theology to, number one, be able to breathe some mornings when I felt so oppressed by the fact that I started to feel like a really, pardon my French, shitty person for just being another white spectator in their life. I was very grateful for Stand Your Ground. I was very grateful for the class discussions that I took entirely for granted in moral theology. I've had a very frank conversation with Dr. Thompson about that and my original apprehension to moral theology as a whole. And everybody who has taught me has lent me to be able to endure this experience and to not just endure it, but to thrive from it. But I was extremely grateful for moral theology and the readings that we did in Dr. Thompson's class. So for middlers, dig in. And if you feel like it's annoying, get over yourself, because it's not. It's a bigger world out there, and you need to learn how to live in it. And that's all I have to say about that. So we are not going to get to give Matariki a ton of time, and I'm going to read some of this off of my slide because I can't possibly remember it all. But Matariki is a star cluster that is most commonly known across the world as Pleiades. So you may have heard that. And it's part of a larger constellation of stars called Taurus. And it's one of the earliest recorded groups of stars in human history, with a record that dates back some 17,000 years. And around the world, there are lots of names for it. But again, Pleiades is the one you're going to probably know the most. And so the next slides, again, I'm going to just kind of go through very quickly because we don't have time to really get into all of them. But each of these, so the image that you see in the middle, the largest woman with kind of the hair coming out to the side, is frequently the person most called Matariki, kind of the mother of all of this, and then her children, and each of them determines what's going to kind of happen this year. It's kind of like having a farmer's almanac in the sky. And so depending upon how bright a particular star is, will tell you what's going to happen that year. And again, I can't go through all of these, but I have slides if you're interested in terms of what each star means, but I think you kind of get the point. And I have much more to talk about, so I can't go through all of them. However, sadly, they were anticipating another wet year. They needed more water, like a hole in the head. Lots and lots of flooding, even in the time that I was there. But nonetheless, and they're just beautiful. The images are just beautiful. So a little, this is in Whakatane. When we were leaving, I got my flat Jesus pictures in. And so I just mostly wanted to show you. I knew people would be sad if I didn't show some beautiful pictures. So here are some beautiful pictures of which I have nothing else to say. They're just beautiful. Jacinthia and I did go to the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, and we walked through some of the museum. Unfortunately, again, we're just going to I've kind of given you as much of the history. You can see me in that video. That's me in my black vest, my very gray hair. Jacinthia took that video. So this is a marae on the Waitangi Treaty Grounds. It is, for all intents and purposes, a tourist attraction intended to educate people. And so that gives you a sense of what a pōwhiri would sound like. Just to give you a little something. Again, what they have there that I think is especially important is, so how did Rapiata say this to me once? We have a lot of words to say the same thing in English. They have one word that has a lot of different meanings. And so part of the problem in the treaty was how it was translated. So when it was signed by a small group of chiefs, and then it had to go out around the country. And so they translated it into Te Reo, and the translation took advantage of some of the language differences to downplay how much power the Māori people were agreeing that the crown would have. So there was a misunderstanding, arguably a deliberate misunderstanding, that gave the crown power that the Māori people would not have expected or understood was going to happen. And so it did go around, it did get signed, and that's part of what the crown was apologizing for and what they had to kind of come back and fix. If you ever do go to Aotearoa, please put going to the Waitangi Treaty Grounds on your things to do. It's a drive from Auckland. You're not gonna, it's a long trip, but it is absolutely worth going to. I think you want to understand. Yeah, we're just gonna move on from that. Okay, so as I mentioned, Jacinthia, that was what Jacinthia planned for me, that whole length of trip. And I had my own agenda that I really wanted to make sure I got to the South Island, and I really wanted to try to go to Australia because I was close. And if one more person told me, but do you understand that it's like a 3-hour flight? And I was like, do you understand that it's like 20 hours from where I live? So 3 hours is kind of a cakewalk. I'm going to Australia. So I started talking about this everywhere I went. And when I was with Mari, she was like, you know, we have a Maori priest in Sydney and you should go and be with him. And I was like, okay, cool. And so then I went up to see Fran and I was talking to her husband, Rapata, and I said, yeah, I'm trying to get to Sydney. And he's like, you know that Fran's cousin is a priest in Sydney. And so I contact Mari and I go, so there's a priest in Australia named Malcolm, and that's apparently Fran's cousin. And she's like, oh yeah, that's the guy. And so it was just amazing, like the amount of people that were related was kind of crazy. So the picture on your screen is Malcolm and his wife, and we had a hui at his house of just a group of women that are incredibly active in his church. His church is called Te Wairua Tapu, Church of the Holy Spirit. And he gave me a lot of education about a lot of things, not the least of which was the role that the Aborigines have. And so the he shares his church with an Aboriginal congregation, and the Aborigines are not allowed to run their own church. So the white leaders of the Anglican diocese, I guess we'll call it the Anglican diocese. It's Anglican, but it's an incredibly evangelical version of Anglicanism. So it wouldn't look like what we think of as, it would look more like an evangelical church to us than it would to an Anglican church. Nonetheless, they're not allowed to make decisions about their church. So everything has to go through the white leadership there. And one of the things that I didn't talk about, and it may come up later, I don't remember anymore, but I didn't talk at all about Samuel Marsden. So Samuel Marsden was an Anglican priest, and he was the missionary that first preached the gospel in Aotearoa. And kind of most of the people that I spoke to in Aotearoa, there were a lot of people who wouldn't agree with this, but the people that I met with were like, he was a pretty good guy. Like, he introduced us to Jesus. We were good with that. Very different opinion when you go to Australia. And I watched a video that I wish I could show you, but it's on Australian TV, and for the life of me, I could not find it anywhere through a Google search to be able to bring it here. But they were kind of talking about the difference, like this competition between Australia and New Zealand, like kind of who's better. It's kind of a big brother, little brother. I kind of think of it in my own mind as it's kind of the way New York and like Massachusetts fight, in terms of like one's the big brother and one's just trying to be. In Massachusetts, you know, you're the little brother. So the Crown had a very different relationship with Aotearoa and Australia, and this kind of plays out with them. And it sort of started with Samuel Marsden in a way. So in the Māori iwi had chiefs, and it appears through, this comes from this documentary that I can't show you, that the Māori, that made sense to Samuel Marsden, so he respected the Māori more. He respected that they had a chief system because that's kind of the way England operated, right? The Aborigines didn't have chiefs. That's not how they governed, as it were. So he dismissed them and, basically speaking, set about exterminating them. And so I can genuinely say I have a very small understanding of Aboriginal culture, or just sort of anything about a lot of Native traditions and Native cultures. But it's really one of the worst cases of genocide against an Indigenous group of people that I'd ever been exposed to. They've genuinely been trying to wipe them out. And they're still very much, as we see in a lot of places today, as I write about in here. I'm just kind of trying to skip ahead. They don't, okay, so Aboriginal families are being pushed out of what are traditional Aboriginal neighborhoods, because you see this a little bit in Baltimore, in Maryland, as neighborhoods are being sort of fixed up. Black families are being pushed out, and more white families are moving in, right? That's what they're doing in Sydney, is that they're fixing up some of the neighborhoods that were traditionally Aboriginal. They can't afford to live there, and they're pushing them out, and more white people are moving in. So it was just a very interesting contrast. They had some choice words for the good Reverend Marsden and referred to him as a piece of male anatomy that I won't repeat in front of Mother Julia, but it was not good. It was a very different conversation about Samuel Marsden, let's put it that way. At any rate, they don't have a marae, but this is where they're hoping to build one. And then again, just because I know people want beautiful pictures, Sydney. They did have a land acknowledgement. I appreciated that. And so there it is. So really quickly, I don't want to leave out Emma. I got to go down to see Emma in the South Island. This ginormous block is because Emma drove me a lot of places. Emma was the only person that I stayed with who is not actually an ordained person. She is a healer, a Māori healer. And she just took me to see some of the most amazing places. I got to see all of this because Emma was like, do you like driving? And I said, sure. She's like, great, we're gonna go. And we would just drive for 3-4 hours. She would drive me over mountain passes. She just took me everywhere. She introduced me to Punamo, some jade, which I appreciated. I want to just talk about, you notice that she has the tattoos. I figure someone's going to ask me, I'm going to read this so I don't butcher it. So I'm going to speak about what you see on a woman first. The moku kawe, I think I'm saying that right. These are typically done by women. They're usually on the lips and chin. The moku kawe represents a woman's whānau and the leadership within her community. It recognizes her whakapapa, or her genealogy, her heritage, her status, and her abilities. It's a traditional tonga passed down over many generations within them. If you see it on a man, it's the whole face. They receive the ora on their face, and it's usually a symbol of nobility. And it is believed that the head is the most sacred part of the body. I will not, Cynthia will appreciate me telling you this. Please don't be just a wildly curious white person when you go to New Zealand or you ever meet a Maori person and say, wow, I really like your tattoo. What does it mean? It's not like they got, like when I was in college, everyone I knew was getting the like little fighting Irish guy from Notre Dame tattooed somewhere on their body. And so you might say, oh, are you Irish? Like that would be like a normal conversation. We're very into asking those questions. Myra has a tattoo of a labyrinth, right? Like, so, and I know that, and I know what that's important. These are deeply meaningful tattoos for them. This is not just because they, you know, decided to get drunk and go out and get tattooed. This isn't what happens in their culture. They have ceremonies where they get tattooed, and their tattoos tell a story of their ancestry. So first of all, if you don't know someone, you have no business asking them about it. When you know someone, you need to ask them in a time where you can ask and say, and it's a way to ask permission to say, can I ask about your tattoo? To just give you a sense, I did that with Emma, and I said, would it be all right? Would you ever feel comfortable sharing with me the story of your tattoos and what they mean? When we, you know, are in her home and have time, and she said yes, and we never got to it. Cynthia also has tattoos, and she promised to tell me hers, and we didn't really get to that either. So, but because they're deeply personal and you want to have time to unpack them. So don't rush somebody on their tattoo stories. It's very disrespectful. And some people won't talk to you. The Franz Joseph Glacier, I just think it's beautiful. The way I had journaled about this, we don't have so much time to talk about it, is that it looked to me like the mountain had been crying. It's melting. This is Emma's marae. And I will only share because Emma is the one who gave this to me. I got gifts from everybody. And this is the symbol that I am wearing. So a lot of people, someone asked me, and I won't say who, asked me if it was a shoehorn. And I was like, did you really think it was a shoehorn? Are you just being funny? It's not a shoehorn. It's a tool. And it was essential for their life. And so Emma thought to give this to me, and I am very grateful. And I wear it all the time. And then I have all of the different stones that you will see. This is the beach by the Aotearoa River, which is where the jade comes from. And as you can see, the stones kind of look white. Jade tends to be, this one is starting to look green because I rub it a lot. But they look more white than anything when you find them on the beach. So when you're talking about finding a needle in a haystack, they don't come out they don't look like this. I'm not walking around looking for this, which would have been lovely. So when I found one, I was super, super excited, and I felt like it was just the greatest thing. And Emma explained to me that the tradition is that you have to give the first stone you find away. That was the deal. And you give it away to somebody who you truly love and who was very important to you. And my stone went to Mother Julia. I would not have been able to, no disrespect to everything I already said about Dr. Thompson, but I also would not have made it through that trip if it were not for Mother Julia. This is the second stone I found. So this is the one I got to keep. So I was very excited about it. But I wanted you to see that. The last slide I'm going to show you, for the most part, not only American, but what you're seeing there is Pine Tree Farm. Pine trees are not indigenous to New Zealand, and they are creating a wealth of problems. But they grow really fast there, and they're good for building. And so a lot of investors, none of whom, or maybe very few of whom, are actually Aotearoa or New Zealanders, have bought up land to build these. What you see on the other side of the screen is what it looks like after you've chopped them down, and they have all of what they call slash all over the property. So when they had all of the flooding, what ended up happening is all of that slash, because they don't clean up the property. So this kills their indigenous life, this kills their indigenous plants, wildlife, not human life, and their plants. And then because nothing else can grow when the pine trees are growing, it's blocking out sunlight, and the needles kill everything off on the ground. So it's just very destructive. What would happen when they had all of the storms and the flooding happened, all of that slash washed down and caused flooding and destroyed property, mad. And none of the investors paid because it was an act of God. So they profited from the land, screwed the people over who lived there on multiple fronts, and then walked away scot-free. And I share that because some of those investors are American, and we need to just sit with them. And I offer that for you because you're also our environment guy. If you want to see later, this is the Po. I have an example I want to just show about how we rewrite history. So Po were being torn down in churches and Māori spiritual grounds as being idols. And what it actually is, and I can't read all of this right now, but as you can see in that one that's got all the writing, this is a Po that I had gotten a picture of in the far north. And this is an explanation of what all of the carvings mean. And the white people came in and said you couldn't have that anymore. And so I just wanted to show you a comparison. This is a cross that's standing in the burial ground at Trinity Wall Street, which if not the oldest, it's one of the oldest. Is it the oldest church in the Episcopal Anglican Church in the US? Or one of the oldest. Now you may not be able to see it from where you're sitting, but you'll notice there's carved images going all the way up that. And it's telling the story of Noah on one side, it's telling the story of Isaac on one side, and it's telling stories. So apparently the takeaway is that we didn't really mind Po, we just minded what stories they were telling. Because this was erected at the same time those were being torn down. We have to sit with that. So in the black jacket, so Jacynthia with the scarf, the Reverend Claire Barry, and then the Reverend Brenda Ruckle. These were, I got to meet them on my last day. So as we are going to end, here's the thing. When I want to just thank a bunch of people. I want to thank all of the women in this picture, especially Jacynthia, who was such a gracious host. I want to thank Māori. I want to thank Fran and Rapiata and their beautiful daughter, Carrie Ann. I want to thank, and all of their whānau actually. I want to thank Bettina and everyone from the Puramarangi. I want to thank Emma. I want to thank Malcolm and Pat and everyone in Sydney. I want to thank Dr. King for putting me onto this. And I want to thank all of my professors, especially Whānau Father Richard, who's not here, and Mother Julia and Dr. Thompson, who really gave me what I needed to survive this, because it was a slog. I couldn't have possibly accomplished this. I have lots of gifts here. There are many things that Bettina Zamarangi gave me. There is a guest online right now. Pammy, I brought all of the keti that you built and gave to me, so I have those. Thank you so much. I have lots and lots of books. I do want to leave you with one thing before I forget. I want to just talk quickly about the New Zealand Prayer Book. Lots of Americans like the New Zealand Prayer Book. Stop stealing the New Zealand Prayer Book, please. If you are having a multicultural service and you want to give honor to the different cultures in the Anglican tradition and you want to share something out of the New Zealand Prayer Book that is going to honor their tradition, they'd probably be okay with that. If, however, you are like a lot of people I know who are like, this is just a really cool prayer, that's acculturation, that's stealing. That's not okay. It's a copyrighted book. So please be nice. I promised I would share that. Also, find a New Zealand person and ask them for permission to use their material. But like anything else, if you're dropping it in, as an example, when I would go to Pakeha churches, they're all supposed to do services in Te Reo, the service is supposed to be bilingual. And more often than not, they'll just drop in the Lord's Prayer in Te Reo. But then they'll do it out of the liturgical sync. And then when it comes up in the Eucharistic prayer, they'll do it again in English. Like, that's cultural appropriation. I said acculturation. I meant cultural appropriation. It's just not okay. So please don't be a continuing part of that. I just wanted to leave with that. So finally, the last thing that we do, I'm going to say something to my people. I don't know if I'm going to say it right, but I'm going to say it anyway. And then every meeting we go to ends with singing. And someone would get up and start to sing a waiata, or kind of a hymn. And other people in the group from that iwi would stand up and join. I'm going to sing this waiata, and we're all going to say it's going to go well. And if you feel so moved at any point to stand up and join me, feel free to do so. If you don't, that is also okay. And I'm going to read this again from my whānau because I don't want to screw it up. No rea huri noa a te whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. So for our closing, in case you're wondering, we sing this through twice. He honore, he kororia, mangarongo ki te whenua, whakaro, paie, I ngā tangata katoa. Ake, 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 amine. Te atua, te piringa, toku oranga. He honore, he kororia, mangarongo ki te whenua. Whakaro, paie, I ngā tangata katoa. Ake, 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 amine. Te atua, te piringa, toku orenga. I thank everyone for coming, and I thank all of you again from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you. I just want Malcolm to see I brought Blinky Bill, Malcolm and Pat, and I'll tell everyone what that is. So thank you all. There's plenty to look at if you'd like up here. I'm gonna stop sharing. I see some chat. What time is it in New Zealand? What time is it in New Zealand? We started at 10:30 their time, so it's about noon tomorrow. Yeah.
Just want to say, tino rawe, tō mahi. Pammy and I have to go. I'm supposed to be in Palmerston North an hour ago, but hey, aha.
Thanks for logging on, Māori. I appreciate it, Pammy. It was good to see you both, and have a wonderful day. Thank you for being a part of my story.
Okay, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
I would just like to echo what Mari has just said, Kristen. Thank you very much for your very personal reflection of your experience here in Aotearoa.
Thank you.
Your capture, of the ethos of Māori life, our thoughts, our words and practice is testament to our having done a reasonable job of immersing you in our context, whether it be joyful or sad.
It was wonderful.
The one thing you said to me when you arrived was, this journey is intercultural and I want to experience the uncomfortable. I remember that on day one. I want to experience the uncomfortable. That never left me the whole time that you were with us. We delivered. And you've shared that with us. We delivered, we journeyed together, we laughed, we got angry, we compared pears and apples. We shared, we prayed, we cried, we delivered. Ngā mihi aroha ki a koe. Congratulations on your ordination to the diaconate. And you'll remember that in our prayer book, we close with these words at the Eucharist services every Sunday. Haere I runga I te aroha. Haere I runga I te rangi Māori. Go in love, go in peace. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Jacinthia. I hope I did you all proud. I appreciate you so much. So thank you so much. Kia ora. And
thank you, Grace.
You're welcome.
Really beautifully done.
Thank you.
I don't think there's any sort of right or wrong way to engage with like these questions, but I think just the depth and vulnerability with which you do it. I mean, that's, I think it's just a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
How to do that well. So,
it was a journey.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like.
Thank you very much. I meant every word of it.
Yeah.
And Ben King, as I live and breathe.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. I'm just amazed you're actually listening in one of my classes.
Just the one.
Just the one where we talked about New Zealand. Well done.
Yeah. It's the one that stuck with me, and then the rest of the classes, that's all I thought about.
I'm also very glad that Claire Barry was able to make the connection, and that's a good sign to everyone to do a DMin.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your day. Does anyone else want to come just pop on camera and say hi to Dr. King?
Hey all.
And where are we supposed to do that, D-Man?
Only at Swanee.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
just questioning. Okay, excellent.
Well, thank you, Dr. King, for being a part of my journey. I appreciate it, and for just getting me to this place. It was amazing.
And am I right that my children appeared at one point? I'm sorry about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. At some moment we had some very loud kid talk, and then we heard your... I'm not sure which one, but that was one of Dr. King's kids. Yeah.
I think it was because you said you were about to cry, and as you know, I don't really like crying, so my children interrupted you.
Nice. Well, thanks for that. Appreciate it. All right, you have a good
great stuff. All right, bye all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Great job.